Which brings us to the statement on contracts for difference. Secretary of State Ed Miliband.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I congratulate you on your new role in this House. With permission, I would like to make a statement about the 6th Contracts for Difference allocation round. It's less than 2 months since this government came to office with a mandate to fix the foundations and make Britain a clean energy superpower. The last government left this country exposed to international fossil fuel markets. As a result, every household and business paid the price in the worst cost of living crisis and energy bills crisis in memory. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, because of Britain's particular exposure, families and businesses in our country were hit harder than others. The only way to provide this country with the energy security the British people deserve is through homegrown clean energy we control. That is the mandate on which this government was elected, and that is what we will deliver. Now, last year's Contracts for Difference auction under the previous government was a fiasco, with no offshore wind projects awarded. A disaster for the industry and for our efforts to move away from dependence on fossil fuels. In July, when we came to office, I made the decision to expand the budget for this year's auction by 50% to maximise the amount of homegrown clean power we could secure while delivering value for the British people. And today the results are in. I can announce to the House that we have secured a record-breaking 131 new clean energy projects. More projects for our country as a whole than any previous auction. More projects in England, more projects in Scotland, more projects in Wales than any previous auction. Over 2.5 times the capacity secured in last year's auction. Nearly 10 gigawatts of clean, homegrown power, enough to power the equivalent of 11 million homes. Madam Deputy Speaker, the most successful renewable auction in British history. And a major step forward in our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower and help Britain get off the roller coaster of volatile global gas markets. Let me set out in detail the results for the House. First, solar is one of the cheapest and most readily deployable energy sources at our disposal. In this auction, we have secured a record 93 solar PV projects, the largest number of solar projects ever in an auction, unlocking 3.3 gigawatts of new solar, a 20% increase compared to our installed capacity. Second, we have secured almost 1 gigawatt of onshore wind. I must, though, report to the House that thanks to the party opposite's near-total ban on onshore wind, there was, I'm afraid, just one small onshore wind project in England of 8 megawatts. Their 9-year ban destroyed the pipeline of projects. That's why, in one of its first acts, this government lifted the onshore wind ban in England. And our onshore wind task force will now go about the process of working with industry to rebuild the pipeline of projects. Third, this auction was a success on the emerging technologies that will serve our country in the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, floating offshore wind offers a huge opportunity in every part of Britain. The last auction secured no floating offshore wind. On coming to office, I was presented with a budget that risked repeating the mistakes of the past. So I took the decision to more than double the budget that covers this cutting-edge technology. I can report to the House that today's auction has secured a 400-megawatt floating offshore wind project. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is more than 10 times bigger than the previous biggest floating offshore wind farm in Britain. And this floating offshore at a lower price. And this floating offshore wind farm alone is double the size of all of Europe's installed floating offshore wind capacity. In addition, on tidal, where Britain has huge leadership opportunities, we have secured 6 new tidal stream projects at the lowest ever price. Fourth, on fixed offshore wind, in contrast to the 0 gigawatts secured in last year's round, we have secured 4.9 gigawatts of offshore wind, enough to power the equivalent of 8 million homes. This includes securing both the largest and second largest offshore wind projects in Europe, Hornsea 3 and Hornsea 4 off the Yorkshire coast. Madam Deputy Speaker, an industry flat on its back because of the mistakes of the last government, back on its feet thanks to this government. And I can also report to the House that across the whole auction, all these results were secured at prices well below the maximum price limit. Prices which demonstrate that wind and solar are the cheapest sources of power to build and operate in our country. And for the House's benefit, a clearing price for offshore wind that is 5 to 7 times lower than electricity prices driven by gas at the peak of the energy crisis. The success of this round doesn't just offer greater energy security for the British people, it also offers the possibility of good jobs throughout Britain. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, that will not happen without action by government, because we know that too often in the past, renewable energy produced in Britain has not created enough good jobs in Britain. So with Great British Energy and our National Wealth Fund, we will invest to make sure our clean power mission produces jobs in every corner of the United Kingdom. Madam Deputy Speaker, this government has been in office for less than 2 months. In that time, we have lifted the onshore wind ban, consented more nationally significant solar capacity in 1 week than the last government did in 14 years, now delivered the most successful renewables auction in the history of the country. And on Thursday, we debate the second reading of the Great British Energy Bill. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a government in a hurry to deliver our mission: energy security, lower bills, good jobs, tackling the climate crisis, and I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Minister Mark Garnier.
Well, thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say to the Secretary of State that I'm grateful to him for his timely advance sight of his statement. So I'd like to put on record, if I may, that these benches, we welcome the success of the contract difference for allocation round 6. The Secretary of State is right to be proud of his achievement by the government, and it is indeed something to be celebrated that we as a country are creating an extra 131 clean energy projects that includes 5 gigawatts of offshore wind farms and 3 megawatts of floating wind. And the Secretary of State will also, of course, be grateful to the previous government for setting up the details of this auction round 6, last November. The previous Secretary of State recognised the problems of AR5 and the price set for offshore wind, a price that was set before a round of inflation that made the CFD strike price cap too low for the producers. And by the way, Madam Deputy Speaker, this was not just a UK problem. This affected other projects for offshore wind around the world. So, Mr. Speaker, increasing the strike price by around 60% to the current AR6 price of £73 has been crucial in securing the current success. And of course, the previous government, as well as that, had many other successes. In 2010, just 7% of our energy needs were supplied by renewables. Today, it is nearly 50%. This has come from many initiatives, not least bringing on the contract for different auctions in 2014 and making the auction process an annual event, an initiative that was learned from AR5 problems. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, it would not be fair to ignore the contribution by the new Secretary of State, and he has, as he said, increased the pot for this year's auction by 50%. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, while this is very welcome, and who wouldn't, frankly, welcome more renewable energy, this does not tackle our energy issues. At the same time as increasing renewable energy production, the government is decreasing UK gas production. The UK needs reliability of supply of energy, and we all know that we cannot predict with any certainty when the wind will blow or when the sun will shine. That is why we need baseload, dispatchable energy that can supply the energy needs of our homes and our economy. We recognise the importance of investing in renewables to deliver clean energy, and the 9.6 gigawatts announced today is absolutely a brilliant step in the right direction. But given these successes and his self-declared success today, why does he plan to saddle the country with billions in debt to fund Great British Energy? In the previous months, the Right Honourable Gentleman may have answered that question with the purpose of GB Energy, which was to cut energy bills by £300. However, we note on this side of the House that his promise to cut energy bills seems to have gone missing, much like the winter fuel payment of 10 million pensioners. Despite his pledge and that of many honourable members on this side of the House, he will be aware that energy bills are in fact going up. And can the Right Honourable Gentleman confirm when bills will fall and by how much? Pensioners, however, are not the only ones being impacted by this government's ideological energy targets. As I've already mentioned, the Right Honourable Gentleman banned new oil and gas, and a ban that will cost 200,000 oil and gas workers their jobs. However, research conducted by the industry predicts that the move will see tax revenues from that industry fall by £13 billion by 2030. On this side of the House, we welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman's ambitions to make sure that the jobs created by the transition are located in Britain. But at this stage, the majority of jobs in the solar and wind sectors are located in China. What steps is he taking as the current Secretary of State to ensure all the jobs created through AR6 are going to be located in Britain? And the Right Honourable Gentleman has already made a bit of a habit of riding roughshod over the concerns of local communities, approving developments without regard to local communities' concerns. These decisions will see some of Britain's green belt and best agricultural land be developed. So can the Right Honourable Gentleman therefore confirm what share of today's investment will take place on the green belt? What protections is he putting in to protect the green belt? And the Right Honourable Gentleman has spoken at length about the need to overcome challenges facing the grid. In government, we delivered a 500% increase in the amount of renewable energy connected to the grid, but we recognise that so much more needed to be done. So what steps is the Right Honourable Gentleman taking to support this further increase? Has he investigated undergrounding? And what plans does he have to protect the countryside from further pylons? And I note from the Right Honourable Gentleman today he's recommitted to decarbonising the grid by 2030. We have previously warned him of the risk of being overambitious, including that this will leave families facing the cost. However, it was not just this side of the House that have warned him of this, with Chris Stark, his newly appointed Head of Mission Control, once describing a 2030 target as overambitious. Will the Right Honourable Gentleman please share exactly what his Head of Mission Control believed to be overambitious about a 2030 decarbonisation target? And his Head of Mission Control also warned that it was entirely fair that people are concerned about the cost of decarbonising by 2030. Will the Right Honourable Gentleman therefore confirm that neither taxpayers or bill payers will be left with the cost of the 2030 target? Indeed, Mr Speaker, can the Right Honourable Gentleman tell the House when we will see a proper comprehensive estimate for the full system's cost of his decarbonisation plans by 2030 or for 2030? In conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, on this side of the House, we absolutely welcome that the Right Honourable Gentleman has built on our successes in boosting renewable energy. However, we hold serious concerns about what this round will mean for Britain's green spaces and whether, given the increased cost of AR6, his commitment remains to cut bills by £300.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, look, can I first congratulate the Honourable Gentleman on his elevation after the election. I look forward to our exchanges in this House. I just want to say to him very gently that the crucial first phase of opposition, in my experience, is having a bit of humility to admit where you got it wrong. And look, I don't deny that some of the things the last government did were right, but quite a lot of the things they did were wrong. A 9-year ban on the cheapest, cleanest form of power, blocking solar projects across the country, crashing the offshore wind market, leading to the worst energy bills crisis in generations. Madam Deputy Speaker, that is their legacy. And I do think that at some point some of their leadership candidates are going to have to face up to it. Let me deal with the specific points he made. And in a sense, if I may say to him respectfully, I feel like he answered some of his own questions. So he draws attention to the fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the energy bills are rising on October the 1st. He's right about that. And that is deeply regrettable. Why is it happening? It's happening because we're exposed to international gas markets. Because it's about power we don't control. And so every solar panel we don't put up, every onshore wind turbine we don't erect, every piece of grid we don't build leaves us more exposed. And, you know, in a sense, the Conservative Party has got a sort of dilemma on this because they're sort of facing both ways, but they've got to face up to this fact. And of course we're going to have a proper and orderly transition in the North Sea, keeping existing fields open for their lifetime and having a just transition for the workforce. But the idea that the Conservative Party and some of their erstwhile friends are clinging to, that fossil fuels will get us out of this, is just completely belied by all the facts and the crisis that we went through. On jobs, he says, and I agree with him, that we need to have jobs in this country. And he sort of says as if it's hard to remember who was in power for the last 14 years. You know, it's terrible. It's all being produced elsewhere. And, I mean, he's right. Germany has almost twice as many renewable jobs per capita as the UK. Sweden almost 3 times. And Denmark, most interestingly, Madam Deputy Speaker, with its publicly owned energy company, Ørsted, nearly 4 times as many. So when he asked about Great British Energy, one of the reasons why, and we'll debate this on Thursday, one of the reasons why we went to the electorate, and indeed were endorsed on this point, with Great British Energy, is unless we have a publicly owned national champion, all the evidence is that the jobs will go elsewhere. This is part of having a basic industrial policy. Now, he talks about solar energy, and I'm afraid, again, he's sort of got to make up his mind where he is. He says he agrees with me that we need clean energy in this country. We've got to get off the international gas markets. The problem is they ducked every difficult decision. And then he asks about undergrounding. So suddenly, they were in power for 14 years, they had plenty of time to do undergrounding of all the cabling. Why didn't they do the undergrounding? Because they know it's multiple times more expensive. And now they come along, less than 2 months after the general election, they say, it's time for some undergrounding of the grid. I mean, for goodness sake, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I had experience of being leader of the opposition. Maybe it's time the party opposite had some private tutorials on how to do opposition.
Perkins. Toby Perkins?
Sorry. It's great to see my right honourable friend in such ebullient spirit, and I have to say his enthusiasm has only been matched by the industry today, who've roundly welcomed this auction, the decision he took back in July to increase the size of this auction. And can I say to him, what this demonstrates is that if we have a government that is consistent and is positive and is ambitious, the industry will respond and will back his plans. Can he assure the House that the great start that he's made is going to be continued with a consistent plan under this government so that they can all invest for the long term, knowing the government will always back them?
My honourable friend makes a typically eloquent point, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is about a partnership with private industry. The truth is, and I suspect there is cross-party agreement on this, is that much of the investment we need for the clean power mission will come from the private sector. Now, the truth is that we on this side have a difference with the party opposite, because we believe lots of that comes from breaking down the barriers to planning and grid, which is a massive challenge, supply chains and skills. There is also a role for what we call catalytic public investment, levering in extra private investment. But I think the other point that my honourable friend makes is absolutely right, which is there is huge enthusiasm in the private sector and in industry, more generally, for this sense of mission for the country. We want this to be a mission that involves every business that has an interest in this, and I believe we can achieve that.
Democrat spokesperson Wera Hobhouse.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We Liberal Democrats very much welcome the results of this round. It is indeed a significant improvement from last year, when the previous Conservative government completely failed with 0 bids from the onshore wind developers. These results show that the CFD programme is back on track. It demonstrates the power of industry and government working together to identify and fix problems so that we can bring in the vital investment from private sector required for a clean power system transition. Britain's unique geography is an asset, abundant in natural resources. We must harness wind and the world's largest tides. And it is hugely encouraging that there was a record-breaking amount of solar capacity procured. Solar targets were repeatedly missed by the previous government, whatever they're saying now about their record, and this round is, of course, a welcome change. Unlike the Conservative government, which left us at the whim of the global oil and gas market, as has already been pointed out, this government is making choices that will increase our energy independence and lower energy bills for our consumers. As we are looking forward, future allocation rounds, especially in the next few years, must continue to deliver increasing quantities of renewables. This can be achieved by setting ambitious budgets, as well as bringing forward incremental reforms of the CFD regime. Can the Secretary of State assure me that this round is not just a one-off, and that we increase the pace of the CFD's allocation rounds?
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank the Honourable Lady for her support and the warm tone that she uses. And look, she is right to say that we face a big challenge as a country to get the offshore wind built, to get the onshore wind built, to get the solar moving, solar on rooftops, some ground-mounted solar as well. And the truth is that contract for difference auctions have served us well. They continue to serve us well. But I think the right thing for us to do, and we inherited this auction halfway through the round, and we increased the budget substantially to make sure it was a success. But I think the right thing for us to do, and I think this is what she's saying, and the main point she's making, is to talk to industry about how we can make sure that future rounds are a success. But also, one of the things that I am very interested in is how we can have a line of sight for industry so that they can have the industrial certainty to plan ahead. And I think the annual auction round is serving us well, but I think we need to work with industry to know how do we make sure we land the clean power we need and get the jobs here too.
Melanie on.
Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State is right to point out that the previous government presided over the failed AR5 auction round for the offshore wind sector. It was devastating. So I do congratulate him on achieving success for this important industry, but part of the measure of that success will be the wider industrial benefits, including good jobs. So can he tell the House what action he will take to make sure coastal communities like mine do see those jobs, training and manufacturing?
Well, my honourable friend speaks with great experience on this, both her experience in this House and her experience outside this House as well, and I welcome her expertise on these issues. I think she's absolutely right about this. We've got to face up to the fact, Madam Deputy Speaker, we're in a global race for these jobs. Investors are trying to decide, do they locate their blade factories and other investments in the UK or elsewhere? And that's why we went into the election with a range of measures, including Great British Energy, the National Wealth Fund, the British Jobs Bonus, all designed to do the re-industrialisation that my honourable friend is talking about.
Andrew Murison.
What consideration has the Secretary of State given to proposals for an interconnector from North Africa to the UK, bringing reliable solar and wind power at times when the wind isn't blowing here and the sun isn't shining?
Secretary of State.
Look, I say to the honourable gentleman, I'll say at a more general level for reasons he might understand, I think we should be looking at all proposals that can maximise our energy security. He's talking about the X-Links proposal. I'm obviously aware of this proposal. We need to look at that proposal in its broadest sense. But as I say, my interest and my view always has been we need every source of power available. It's why I embrace nuclear, I embrace onshore wind, offshore wind, solar, tidal, carbon capture and storage, and absolutely, the honourable gentleman says from a sedentary position, oil and gas has a crucial role in the transition.
Bill Esterson.
My right honourable friend was quite correct in saying that clean energy is by far the cheapest way to power the UK, something confirmed by industry bodies today when they've welcomed his announcement. But there is going to be intense international competition for investments. So can he confirm how he foresees ensuring that we have the competitive advantage in attracting that investment for years to come?
Secretary of State.
I think, again, my honourable friend speaks about this with great expertise. I think it is part of having a government that is committed to a proper industrial strategy and has the levers to actually make that industrial strategy happen. I think there was an interesting divide with the last government, the opposition, when they were in government, which is we see, of course, America is a different sized country from us, but we see the Inflation Reduction Act as offering real lessons for us about how you can lever in private investment. We're not going to be able to do it at the scale of the Inflation Reduction Act, but these interventions can make a difference. And it's also this crucial point, which is we do care where the manufacturing happens, and we are determined to make sure it happens in the UK.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Secretary of State actually, who's obsessed with renewable energy, be honest with the British people? Because the truth is that the offshore wind turbines bid today are some 20% above current prices. The floating offshore wind is some 3 times the current prices. His own department, Madam Deputy Speaker, say that actually this requires subsidies of some £1.5 billion a year. That's before the extra transmission costs, before the constraint payments, before the compensation payments for blighting the countryside of my constituents, and before the cost of backup when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine. So why would the Secretary of State be honest and tell the truth that renewable energy is more expensive, not cheaper?
Secretary of State.
I have to say that I'm interested in the honourable gentleman's intervention because his manifesto is basically for higher bills and to make people poorer. And you don't need to look into the crystal ball. You just need to look at the record, because the truth is that the cost of living crisis, the energy bills crisis, casts a long shadow in this country. And the energy bills crisis was not caused by our dependence on renewables. It was caused by our exposure to fossil fuels. And he just needs to understand this very basic point, which is that whether fossil fuels are produced in this country or internationally, they are sold on the international market. And that's why the British people paid the price and government forked out £94 billion. And the only way to get off the roller coaster of international gas markets and take back control is to become a clean energy superpower.
Joni Reid.
Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement today? I think this allocation round is testament to the continued success of the Contract for Difference scheme, as we're now on course to produce more renewable energy than ever, and we need to get that power to consumers. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that we need the same political and financial commitment to the development of transmission infrastructure as we do to renewables themselves?
Secretary of State.
I really welcome my honourable friend's question, and I think we should need to be honest about this, Madam Deputy Speaker. We face what you can only describe as a crisis when it comes to our grid situation, because we have people wanting to connect cheap, clean renewables and being offered dates in the 2030s, often late in the 2030s. We have industrial investments that we need to happen and offered dates in the 2030s. Grid reform, and as part of that, planning reform has got to be absolutely crucial, is crucial for this government, and it's crucial for any government that is serious about this. And I'm afraid to say that the legacy of the last government is disastrous when it comes to the grid. We will build the grid, and for all of those people who want to tackle fuel poverty and want lower energy bills, I look forward to support from all parts of the House.
Dave Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and fair play to the new Secretary of State. 5.3 gigawatts of offshore wind is a great achievement on itself, especially compared to the flat zero achieved by the Tories in auction round 5, unlocking, Madam Deputy Speaker, as it does, the vital Inchcape array off my Angus constituency coast and supporting jobs in Montrose, also at Murray West, and the game-changing Greenville floating array off the north-east coast of Scotland. He highlights 1 gigawatt of onshore wind, 8 megawatts of which is coming from England. Can he tell the House today where the rest of that onshore energy is coming from? And with his target now of 60 gigawatts by 2030, how does he believe he will achieve that 9 gigawatts per year from now until 2030? Secretary
of State.
Look, I welcome the first part of the honourable gentleman's question. I even welcome the second part. Look, the only way this works is that whatever our differences, and we have large differences, we have to work with every government across the United Kingdom, whichever government that is, on this task. Gillian Martin and I, the Cabinet Secretary in Scotland, have had many conversations, probably more conversations in a couple of months and in many years under the previous government. And that is a deliberate example that has been set by the Prime Minister, which is country first, party second. And we want to work with governments across the UK to make the renewables revolution that we need happen, to make Britain a clean energy superpower.
Florence Eshalomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it's a pleasure to welcome my friend, the Right Honourable Member, to his place and to see him continue and champion this really important issue which our constituents up and down the country have been crying for. One of the key issues that you see when you go into people's homes is fuel poverty. It is real. Having to hear constituents talk about not being able to heat their home is a reality for many of my constituents in Vauxhall and Camberwell Green. So I know that they will welcome this announcement to see cheaper bills, cleaner energy being produced. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that we need to actually get on with this as quickly as possible? Because the date of October the 1st, those increased bills, residents want to see action from this government and a fast pace to see their energy bills come down.
Secretary of State.
My honourable friend is 100% right about this, and she puts it incredibly well. And look, it's hard for governments of all stripes to admit this truth, which is whether it had been the previous government or this government, when that October the 1st price cap was announced, the truth is it wasn't it wouldn't have been in their control or our control because of our exposure, because these prices are set internationally. So if Putin or the petrostates make decisions, it rebounds on her constituents. And the only solution to this is the clean energy superpower mission that we have. Now, the truth is it will take time, and that is hard, and it will be hard for her constituents and my constituents and constituents across this House. But the answer has got to be to go as fast as possible, because that's what gets us energy security and lower bills.
Sir Julian Lewis.
I warmly congratulate the Secretary of State on his appointment. He's the perfect example of a political renewable. And as politicians, we all have a great deal to contribute to onshore wind. But slightly more seriously, does he share my concern that The Guardian last year and the Daily Telegraph this year both drew attention to the exploitation of Uyghur slave labour by the Chinese in the manufacture of so many solar panels? Other countries have been putting a ban on the import of these. How does he propose to deal with this matter? Because I'm sure he shares our concern that we should not be profiting on the back of that sort of disgraceful exploitation.
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his kind words to me, and he raises an incredibly serious and important issue. And, you know, when I came into government, I have asked for discussions across government on this issue. I think we have to look at there were controls in place, to be fair to the last government, and indeed as part of the ongoing solar task force, they were looking at these issues. But I think we need to really kick the tyres on this to make sure that the proper controls are in place. And my department is very, very happy to have discussions with him and other interested parties on these questions.
Perrin Moon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my right honourable friend for his statement and his tireless campaigning in favour of unleashing our renewable energy potential. As the Secretary of State knows, Cornwall is ready, willing and able to play a full part in the renewable energy transition. But can the Minister outline his plans to support smaller community energy cooperative projects where, once again, Cornwall stands ready to act?
Well, he asked a very important question, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it gives me a chance to advertise second reading of the Great British Energy Bill on Thursday. All are welcome, because it is a really, standing room only, it is a really important point. As part of our plans for Great British Energy, we allocated 3 billion of the 8.3 billion that we set out at the election for what we call the local power plan, and that is absolutely to do what they do as a matter of course in other countries like Denmark and Germany, which is to unleash local renewables, local communities, local councils, community groups, co-ops to be part of this. It's important because I think it's a way to tackle fuel poverty. It's important because it's a way of generating income for local communities. It is also important, Madam Deputy Speaker, as a way of winning consent for local people. So I look forward to my honourable friend and others making a contribution on this question in that debate and others.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. If, as the Secretary of State says he wants to offer a line of sight for industry, can I say to him that he should look more closely at the opportunities that come from the development of tidal stream, particularly but through the creation of a supply chain from the ground up, which is always easier than recovering one which has already gone overseas. But that line of sight has to go in both directions, and that's why developers in tidal stream energy are asking the government to set a 1 gigawatt deployment target. Will he listen to these representations now and act on them?
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman that when I came into office and I was examining the issues around so-called Pot 2, which covers tidal, I was very keen to make sure that we increased the minimum, which we did by 50%, the tidal minimum. And I think these are important discussions to continue. There is a sort of dilemma here, which he will know, which is tidal remains relatively expensive, but the point of the tidal developers is many technologies remained expensive until they were deployed at scale. So, these are hard questions because they are questions about value for money and how much you invest in tidal, but I think those are important discussions that my department needs to have.
Olivia Blake.
Speaker, I'd like to congratulate my right honourable friend, the Secretary of State, and his department for the excellent work on this. But given all we've heard from the Shadow Secretary today, does he agree with me that this government's record success shows that the main block on the sprint to renewables was in fact the Conservative Party?
My honourable friend makes an important point about the legacy of the last government, but I also think that to widen her point, I think I would say to honourable members across this House that there is a need to connect, and this is hard. We need to be candid that this is hard for us as constituency MPs. We need to connect the debates we have in this House about fuel poverty and energy bills and the decisions that are being made in our areas. Because I just say very, very candidly, unless we build the grid, unless we build solar, unless we build onshore wind, we are never going to get off the roller coaster of international gas markets. And all of us face a choice. And I think we need to have a public debate about this, because if we're going to tackle fuel poverty and do the things that I described, we do need to make the building that is required happen.
Wild.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say gently to the Secretary of State that at the general election he promised to bring energy bills down by £300. They're now going up by 10% in October. So when will my constituents see the reductions that his party promised, or did they not mean it?
I mean, I have to say to the honourable gentleman that I think tonight he'll think that wasn't a very smart point to make. I mean, weeks after we came into office, the price cap went up. I've explained why the price cap went up. It went up because of our reliance on international gas markets. The decision he's got to make is, does he support our mission to make Britain a clean energy superpower, to bring bills down, or does he not?
Tracy Gilbert.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there's one notable absence from the allocation round results today, and that's Berwick Bank Wind Farm. Located in the North Sea, Berwick Bank has the potential to deliver up to 4.1 gigawatts of clean electric and lead to further investment in the supply chain and manufacturing, which in the Port of Leith, in my constituency, is a prime location for this project, but we're still waiting to hear about the consent. Can the Secretary of State confirm that he will push the Scottish Government to speed up their Section 36 consent process so that Berwick Bank can come forward in the next allocation round and we can get on with delivering a sprint to clean energy?
I'm glad my honourable friend has raised this point. I think we face planning decisions, planning questions at a policy level, let me put it that way, right across the United Kingdom, including in Scotland, including in England, and we will be working with the Scottish Government and others to make sure that we have a planning system that is fit for purpose and can build the clean energy that we need.
Lee Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now then, this Secretary of State is absolutely living in a completely different world to my constituents, because they're not asking for this on the doorstep at all. This Secretary of State, by the way, Madam Deputy Speaker, is quite happy to spend £11.6 billion on climate aid abroad, £8.5 billion on GB Energy, yet rob our pensioners of £300 at the same time. But I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. When one of my pensioners in Ashfield receive significant discounts on their fuel bills, and how much will it be by?
Yeah.
I could say to the honourable gentleman, by the way, I thought that they supported a publicly owned energy company in his party, but I may be wrong about that. I can absolutely say to him that this is the way to deliver lower bills for his constituents. And the reality, I mean, they can shout all they like, Madam Deputy Speaker, but the reality they have to face, and I know this is hard for him, the reality they have to face is this, which is, does he believe that continuing reliance on fossil fuels as a country, saying no to renewables, which I think is their position, will give us energy security? And the truth is that it won't. He says he agrees with me. Well, look, I look forward to him supporting our clean energy superpower mission.
Oliver Ryan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I welcome this phenomenal record-breaking achievement from the Secretary of State today, which represents a significant milestone towards clean power by 2030. Let's see more projects in Burnley. Does he agree with me that the best way to protect my constituents' energy bills from future price shocks, the patriotic thing to do, is to ensure that our nation's energy security is secure through homegrown clean power, saving money on energy bills and giving gas tyrants like Putin a bloody nose at the same time?
I 100% agree with him. The notion that our exposure to fossil fuels as a country gives us security has been belied by what's happened over the last few years. And it means, as the Prime Minister often says, it means Putin's boot is on our throat. He talks about this patriotic mission. He's completely right about this. And I do say to other parties in this House, they have a decision to make on Thursday, which is, do they support the Great British Energy Bill? We have public ownership of our energy system in Britain. It's foreign public ownership. State-owned companies from abroad. We say we welcome that investment, but we also want British public ownership. And I hope very much that in the spirit of learning the lessons of their election defeat, other parties will support our bill on Thursday.
Now, in the interest of being helpful to members, I just wanted to gently point out that it's important that members be here for the start of statements if they wish to be called. I'm going to be very kind today. Claire Young.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Secretary of State for his statement. The results of this latest allocation are good news and should be welcomed, especially after the fiasco of the last round. It's vital that Britain does invest in our sustainable green energy production so we can guarantee our energy security and lead the world as a green powerhouse. However, the only way we can achieve this is if we also push ahead with energy storage and ensure we boost our capacity to retain energy generated. So can I ask the Secretary of State what steps his department is taking to accelerate the rollout of new storage solutions, including green hydrogen?
I think the honourable lady, and I welcome her to that, I think she makes an important point. You know, we often get these questions about what do you do in an intermittent system, and you need different forms of both dispatchable power and energy storage. And one of the projects that my department is working on and continuing some of the work of the last government is on long-duration energy storage and battery technology. Personally, I think the system continues to underestimate the potential role of battery and long-duration storage, and we will be saying more about this in the months ahead.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The party opposite continues to oppose our publicly owned clean power company, despite widespread public support for it, including in my constituency of East Thanet. Does the Secretary of State recognise the absurdity of the argument the opposition are making, that they're quite happy for public ownership in this country, as long as it's foreign governments, not UK citizens, who own that energy?
I think my honourable friend who has great expertise on these issues makes a really important point, which is that we welcome the success of Ørsted in today's allocation round, the Hornsey wind farms, and it's great for Danish taxpayers that they will get some benefit from this, and it's great for Britain that we will get the investment. But as the Prime Minister often says, why not Britain as well? Why shouldn't we invest in clean energy? Why shouldn't our taxpayers get benefit from this? Why shouldn't we create jobs in this country as well as accelerate clean power? It seems a very simple and logical proposition to me.
John Davis.
Thank you very
Speaker, the Secretary of State will know from his recent visit to Telford that there are businesses right across the country, including in my own constituency, who want to partner with the government on this agenda. Will today's statement and future announcements mean that those private sector businesses that want to put their skills and their own money into it and take risks on behalf of the government and the country to make us a clean superpower have that backing by the Secretary of State?
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right, and I very much enjoyed my visit to Telford and talking to his local business. And I think it's easy to think about this in very macro terms about how many gigawatts and so on. It's the kind of thing I like talking about. But I think my honourable friend is absolutely right that this is as much, if not more, about all of the jobs that we can create in the supply chain. And people in this country want hope and they want change, and this is going to deliver it.
Luke Charters.
I really welcome the auction increasing solar capacity, and there are great projects in my constituency funded by this scheme, such as Hesse Solar. Will the Secretary of State visit Sunny York to see the site once complete? And does he share my conviction that solar is critical in the energy mix if we are to reduce our dependency on foreign oil and gas?
Well, look, I very much welcome my honourable friend's embrace of solar as part of the energy mix. And it's really important to say this, Madam Deputy Speaker. You know, we need more rooftop solar, and there are lots of people in this House who say, why don't we do more on rooftops? I agree with them. There is also, though, an important role for ground-mounted solar, and I very much look forward to coming to York at some point to see the projects that my honourable friend is talking about.
Henry Tufnell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I welcome the statement from my right honourable friend today. It's incredibly exciting and marks a complete change from the party opposite, and so it's incredibly exciting and I thank him for it. The Celtic Sea, which is off the coast in my constituency in Pembrokeshire, has unique conditions of deep water and strong winds, and that allows the opportunity to be a global leader in those new technologies of floating offshore wind. But those unique conditions require a unique approach from government. And so we look forward to AR7. Will the Secretary of State join with me to work to refresh the approach in the auction to ensure that we see more support going to flow projects in the autumn of 2025?
Well, my honourable friend is a great champion of floating wind in the Celtic Sea, and look, he is right about this, which is we're proud of the 400 megawatt project in this round. We do need to look at what are the ways, including through the auction round, but also including through GB Energy and other ways, of making sure that in this crucial technology of floating wind, we build on our advantages, take the opportunities that they provide, and have the industrial capacity. And I look forward to discussions with him and other colleagues on how we make that happen.
And I thank the Secretary of State for that statement.